So now we're going to move on to looking at a couple of variations of the Sidekick. Just in order to get the form, I'm going to show you the traditional karate way of training this kick. I have seen this applied in kickboxing bouts, even in the odd MMA bout. I wouldn't generally advise standing sideways on, especially if it's, like I said, if there's low kicks etc. involved or takedowns involved. It's not a great tactic. But if we do it this way first, it gives you an idea of the basic form of the technique and of sort of driving your hips through, pivoting on the feet, etc. Get the mechanics. So if I actually stand sideways on to my opponent, I step my rear leg behind my lead leg. The deeper I step, the more power I'm going to have. Think about it, if I'm throwing a right-handed technique or a right-legged kick, I want to drive forward and through the target this way. If my lead leg's kicking, as I drive through here, the deeper I step, the more I cock this hip to drive through and lock out. Okay? I said it's unlikely I'd actually apply it this way, but I have seen it done. It's very, very powerful. And in the latter stages of a fight, I've seen it happen where fighters are fatigued and the guy's basically just taken liberties and smashed this in. So I wouldn't generally though advise this. Obviously, I mean, if I'm standing sideways on, there's low kicks involved, I'm pretty compromised here. Just the fact that I'm stood sideways on in the first place, it really limits what I can actually do from here. I've not got that many angles of shot, okay? But it does help get the basics of the technique. I'm kicking with the blade of the foot and the heel. I'm pulling the toes back and I'm kicking with the blade of the foot and the heel. Not the flat of the foot because the shock's going to be dispersed too far. The blade of the foot and the heel, it's a sharper edge. So one more time. Standing sideways onto the target. I step the rear leg behind. I pick the knee up. My backside is now pointing towards my target. I'm not snapping this kick, I'm going to perform it with a lockout. My supporting foot is going to pivot and my hips are going to scissor this way. So once again, the toes of the supporting foot end up facing the wall behind me. As you can see when I'm striking Steve, when I'm setting this kick up, I want to be connecting with my legs slightly bent so I could strike and push through a couple of inches on the shot. Okay. Now we're going to look at where I personally apply this technique from, which is from my basic guard, coming up the centre line and turning through with it. This one does work quite nicely. With all my kicks, just a general point, I tend to throw quite tight, whether it be coming up with the roundhouse kick, whether it be the front kick, or in this case, I'm going to turn through the side kick and change the hip position at the last moment. So let's break that down. The knee comes up the centre line. I turn and pivot on the spot, scissoring my hips as I do so. So I turn first, backside towards the target, back foot turns towards the wall, lock out and extend. Now because I'm changing my hip position and I'm bringing my knee up straight forwards and then turning through, that kind of corkscrew motion down into the target adds some impact, okay? Very effective to the ribs or the solar plexus. Upon landing, I'd be looking to try and pull my foot back and land with my front foot turned forwards. Boom. If I fall through, obviously I'm in a southpaw stance here, I personally am comfortable. For beginners, I would generally sort of advise staying in your own stance. So again, if you've hit, you'll have travelled, you'll be able to step through and follow, okay, and get back into your orthodox stance that way. Alternatively, pull the leg back is your better option if you've got the control to do that. Pick the knee up, drive through, and pull the leg back to your original fighting stance. Okay, so we're going to look at the two variations of the Sidekick on the pads. Really, I would say this first method is more just to train the movement and get the basic body mechanics down. So perform with the step through. So I'm actually going to start with my foot sideways on, okay? Because you're going to need to get this down before we can start to turn from the orthodox stance and turn the hip through. That's quite a complex movement. Step the knee through, knee up and drive. Not hit and push, strike and drive. Push! 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 So now we're going to apply this on the pad the way I would actually apply this when sparring. Coming up from the centre line and turning into the kick. Push! 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 It's important that when I strike, I am locking my hip, knee and heel into a straight line. If my backside is stuck out, I've got nothing behind my hip when I strike. Therefore, if I impact the pad and my hip isn't in the correct alignment, I'm going to, whichever variation I'm doing, I'm going to push myself off the pad. Especially if my person's driving forward, because I've got nothing behind the hip. I need to get my body weight behind it and lock out.